Okay, I think this is the second time I've done something like this in the last couple of weeks. And honestly, I might start doing it more often. I don't know, once a week, couple of times a week, whenever I come up with something, I don't know. But especially in the off season when it can be kind of hard to come up with content on a daily basis for college football, and there's not a lot going on really right now in the world of college football. But make sure you follow me over on Twitter. If you're not, you just search up Uncle Lou. What is my Twitter? At Crazy Uncle Lou is my Twitter. But I've posted a couple of questions over there and got some interesting responses. I made a video. I don't even remember what dumbest fan base. That's what it was. When I did the dumbest fan bases video a week or so ago, that was from a tweet that I had put out. And I got a lot of responses on there. So then I decided to do a video about it. Same thing yesterday or the day before, a couple of days ago, whatever it was. I put over on Twitter, who is one player from another team that you wish you had on your team? Not from last year, not somebody that's gone now to the NFL. I'm talking about for the current upcoming season. Who's one player from another team that you wish you had on your team? Now, it would be real easy to just maybe name whoever you think the best player in college football is, right? Oh, I'd love to have this guy or that guy. But really think about it. Like, I know it's February. Everybody's team is going 100-0. I get that. But there are no perfect teams. There's never been a perfect team. There's always been somewhere where every team, no matter how good they end up being, could have been better, right? Your starting 22 is not the best 22 players in all of college football, right? You might go 15-0 and win a national title. That doesn't mean that there's not a linebacker somewhere that's better than one of the linebackers you had starting, right? So when it comes to Georgia, to me, there are two areas at Georgia I would love to see like instantly improved if I could. And that's sort of where I got the idea for this. But when it comes to Georgia, I look at pass rushers and I look at elite playmaking, true first-round talent wide receivers, right? And in my mind, that's an area where Georgia is lacking in 2024. Now, Georgia's got a ton of defensive linemen, all of which were very highly rated coming out of high school, and all have a lot of potential. None of them have really dominated yet at the college level. We don't have, a Jordan Davis type or a Trayvon Walker or a Jalen Carter or even a Leonard Floyd from several years ago, somebody who can really get after the quarterback on third downs. And the other area is wide receivers, and Georgia's got a ton of wide receivers. They brought in a couple from the portal, and they'll be okay. They'll be pretty good wide receivers, and I think overall Georgia's passing numbers will be pretty good. They're not going to have a 1,000-yard receiver. They're definitely not going to have a 1,500-yard receiver or anything like that. I mean, Georgia's only ever had one over the course of its history. So when I look at Georgia, I'm like, okay, I would love to pluck like a truly elite first-round talent wide receiver, a true wide receiver one from somewhere around college football, and I'd love to pluck maybe a high-end pass rusher from somewhere. And the one that I decided on is actually Trey Moore. Now, he was at UTSA last year, a group of 5 school, but he had 14 sacks. He was a sophomore last year. He'll be a junior this year. He did enter the transfer portal, and Texas picked him up. I don't even know if Georgia went after him in the portal, and that's not even the point of this video. This is kind of just fantasy land. You can literally name any player you want anywhere in the world of college football and have him on your team today. Who would you take? And that's basically the question I asked on Twitter, and I got some interesting responses, and I wanted to read through some of them today. So Darren Graham on Twitter, I think he has a YouTube channel too, by the way, so check him out. He's a Michigan man. But he says Cam Rising. That's an interesting one. Now, Michigan was great last year, national champions, 15-0, but they lost a lot of their coaching staff, a lot of their talent on both sides of the ball. I wouldn't call it a rebuilding year for Michigan. They were recruited really well. I think they'll do okay this coming year. I doubt they'll be as successful as they were last year, but the only way they can do that is to repeat as national champions, and that's hard to do. So I'm not saying that to knock on Michigan. But he says Cam Rising. Of course, Michigan lost multi-year starter J.J. McCarthy. He's gone off to the NFL. Now, they played a couple of different quarterbacks last year, in that Alex Orji. He's an interesting one. I'm going to be honest, I don't know how well he can throw the ball. I'm not an expert on Michigan's backup quarterback situation. I know he's a very athletic, like run-around type of guy, and Michigan would insert him into the game last year, not just in the fourth quarter like of blowouts, but in certain situations, even in the first half of games. And mostly he would run the ball. But Darren says he'd like to have Cam Rising. Cam Rising's interesting. He's been in college football what seems like forever, the quarterback at Utah. He didn't play this last season. He was hurt all year. He tore his knee at the end of the previous year and was never really able to get back for 2023. So he's back at Utah this year. One of the most experienced quarterbacks in college football and a really, really good one. But Darren Graham, a Michigan man, says he'll take Cam Rising at quarterback. What else do we have on here? Mr. Perfect says he's a Georgia fan. And he says, not that we need it, but I'd love to have an absurdly talented wide receiver since we struggle to recruit those. Luther Burden catching passes from Carson Beck would be sick. I agree with everything he says except the part where it says not that we need it. I think we do. I think Georgia does need it. Georgia did not have sort of the explosiveness offensively last year that we have seen in some previous years, throwing the ball. And a lot of Georgia's bigger pass plays were shorter passes with bigger runs. But I think you always need a truly elite wide receiver on the outside. Now, Georgia has won national titles without necessarily having that. But that doesn't mean you wouldn't be better if you did, right? I would love for Georgia to be able to go out and sign 5-star wide receivers. And this is something that I've talked about on this channel a lot. Pretty much every year I've had this channel, Georgia has struggled really throughout its history to sign elite high-level wide receivers. There's a lot of different reasons for that. Georgia's only ever had 1,000-yard receiver. For a long time, they were known as sort of a run-first, ground-and-pound, 3 yards in a cloud of dust type of team, going all the way back to the Herschel Walker days, really all the way up through the middle to late 20-teens. I mean, Jake Fromm was a 3-year starter, never threw for 3,000 yards. That's not a lot in today's college football. I mean, a lot of people throwing for 3,000 yards, but not Jake Fromm. So a lot of the wide receivers, recruits around the country in high school look at that and they go, I don't know if I want to go there. A lot of wide receivers tend to be divas. That's just a fact. I think it's a character trait that helps a wide receiver, actually. But you look at like George Pickens, before that, Georgia had, I guess, A.J. Green. You go all the way back to the early 2000s, Terrence Edwards, who's the only 1,000-yard receiver Georgia's ever had. But Georgia has historically struggled to sign elite, top-level talent wide receivers. That doesn't mean that Georgia doesn't end up with any good wide receivers. They do, but they are project wide receivers. They're 3- and 4-star wide receivers who either end up being way better than people thought, or they get developed in Georgia's system, or they just thrive in Georgia's system. Ladd McConkey is an example of this. There's several others, but and he names Luther Burden, who is obviously one of the best wide receivers in all of college football. Is an absolute beast. He plays for Missouri. Georgia went after him really, really hard out of high school, and like is normally the case with 5-star wide receivers, Luther Burden decided to go elsewhere and ended up at Missouri, and he's one of the best in college football this coming season for sure. Let's see. Who is this? Carnell Tate from Ohio State, says John Jones. Now, I'm not sure who John Jones is a fan of. I don't know if you click. He's 6 feet, 200 pounds, according to his Twitter profile. He went to Albany State University, I guess. Anyway, I don't know if he's a Georgia fan or not, but he says Carnell Tate. Carnell Tate looks to be sort of the next the next wide receiver in a long line of great wide receivers at Ohio State. We'll see if he ends up panning out. They've got Emeka Ibuka coming back this year. Ohio State does, but Carnell Tate should get a lot more playing time this year. But yeah, a lot of potential there with Carnell Tate at the wide receiver position. Big SEC podcast says he's a Dogs fan and he would take James Pierce. James Pierce is a defensive end, I believe, for Tennessee. I know he plays along the front for Tennessee. I think he's a defensive end. But anyway, he had a really good season. He had a really good season last year, and he's back this year. He should be one of the better defensive linemen in the SEC this year, James Pierce, out of Tennessee. That's a good choice, too. That's an obvious area of need, in my opinion, when it comes to Georgia, the defensive line. Really 3. I think I named 2 at the beginning, pass rusher and a true elite wide receiver 1. Defensive line would be another one. Georgia's got a lot of good ones. They don't have any great ones. James Pierce would be a welcome addition to UGA, in my opinion. Let's see. Little Whitey says Florida State was good at every position last year. See, this is what I'm talking about. And I don't want to I hate to pick on Little Whitey, but I made the comment at the beginning of the video that, even if you go 15-0, you don't have the 22 best players in college football. But Little Whitey says they were great at every single position. They didn't need any help. We're not even talking about last year, Little Whitey. We're talking about this year. And we've seen this year's Florida State team in the Orange Bowl, and it didn't look very good. But he says he'll take Cooper DeJean. Okay. Anyway, let's move on before I go down the Florida State rabbit hole again and piss them off again for no reason. Rodney Dawkins says he'd take Caleb Downs. Yeah, raise your hand. Everybody in America would take Caleb Downs. I don't care how good you are at the safety position. If Caleb Downs wanted to transfer to your school would take him. He's an absolute elite playmaking safety. And I think he'll end up being one of the better safeties of the last few years by the time he's all said and done with his college career. He, of course, started at Bama last year as a true freshman All-American team, entered the transfer portal. Another guy that Georgia went after hard, missed out on him, both in his recruitment and in his transfer, and Ohio State landed him, and they're getting an absolute animal. But, yeah, everybody in the country would love to have Caleb Downs. Blue Captain of Michigan Man says, I would have loved to have had Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers is in the Caleb Downs category. No matter how good you are at tight end, had Brock Bowers decided for whatever reason to transfer away from Georgia, he could have gone to any school he wanted. There's not a school in the country that would have said no to Brock Bowers, but he's gone, and we're talking about next year, though. Let's see. Alex Humphreys on Twitter says, for me, UJ could have used Tavondre Sweat, also UT. I like our defensive tackles this year, but we've been spoiled with ridiculous talent there in 21 and 22. I'd have liked to have kept that streak going. Sweat is a lot closer to that. I think he's entering the draft, though. I don't know. Maybe I didn't do a good job of explaining myself in the tweet, but I'm talking about next year in college. So someone that's in the NFL ain't got no interest in it. Nick says he wants Will Johnson at Georgia. Andres, who's an Ohio State fan, says, give me Quinn Ewers. This one surprises me a little bit. And here's why. I do think Quinn Ewers is good. But if I was in Andres' position and I could get anybody in all of college football to make my team better, and I decided, if I'm Andres, I decided that it should be a quarterback. Don't know that it would be Quinn Ewers. I think he's good. I don't know if he's the best quarterback in all of college football. Now, I know there's a connection there between Quinn Ewers and Ohio State, and maybe that's what's making Andres lean that direction. Quinn Ewers, of course, committed to Ohio State and was there for 1 year before transferring out and ending up at Texas, where he's started the last couple of years, leading them to the playoffs last year, and he's back again this coming season. And Texas has Arch Manning waiting in the wings after that. But Andres says, give me Quinn Ewers. If he never reclassified to the 21 class, he wouldn't have lost to Michigan last year. And this year, I'm not sold on Will Howard as of yet. Credit to Andres, because this is the first Ohio State fan that I've really seen come out and say this. I like Will Howard. I've talked about the Will Howard move to Ohio State a couple of times. I'll talk about it again. But I like Will Howard. I think he's a good quarterback. And I think he probably is better than Kyle McCord. If nothing else, you're getting a lot more experience with Will Howard next year than what you had with Kyle McCord this previous year, who, of course, was his first year as a starter. I still think it's a massive drop-off at the quarterback position right now at Ohio State. When you look at the list of quarterbacks they've had really over the last 10 years, all the way up through Justin Fields, and then then C.J. Stroud. So C.J. Stroud back to really 2015 or so. And just an elite string of QBs, right? And then last year we get Kyle McCord, and now we're getting Will Howard. Again, not to shit on Will Howard. I do think he's a good quarterback and probably an upgrade over Quinn Ewers. But I don't think Will Howard is in the same stratosphere as C.J. Stroud, Justin Fields, so forth, so on, all the way back over the last 7 or 8 years. So I definitely understand what Andres is saying here as an Ohio State fan wanting to upgrade that quarterback position, because I don't think. Now, let me say this. Ohio State's the most talented team in the country this year. They're going to be they're absolutely loaded. They're going to be really, really good. A couple of questions along the offensive line they got to answer, but they've got 2 NFL running backs with Henderson, and they brought Judkins in through the transfer portal. A lot of the defense from last year comes back, and Ohio State had one of the probably best 5 defenses in the country last year. Elite playmaking wide receivers. Quarterback and offensive line are a couple of the issues there. But they're going to be really, really good. And it could be that they don't need a quarterback to put up Justin Fields or C.J. Stroud type numbers. You got to remember, when Justin Fields, and even more so C.J. Stroud, particularly C.J. Stroud, when C.J. Stroud was playing quarterback at Ohio State, their defense was not where it needed to be. It wasn't what we're used to seeing from an Ohio State defense. The numbers bore that out when you watched Ohio State play. This is where all the jokes kind of started about Ohio State being soft and their defensive line put on roller skates and pushed around by Michigan multiple years in a row, by Oregon, so forth and so on. That was not the case last year with them defensively. So if they can get even a little bit of an upgrade at quarterback over what they had last year with Kyle McCord and Will Howard. I think they'll be okay. But I do agree with Andres. If this is basically what he's saying, it's still sort of a drop off at the quarterback position versus what Ohio State is used to doing. Cam's Bionic Knee on Twitter says, I want Oregon State's running back. Dude is loyal, talented, and like a smoke. I don't know what that means, like a smoke. I don't know if he meant to say like a snake or like smoke. I don't know. But Cam's Bionic Knee. And what is he? He's a Utah fan. He is a Utah fan. I get it now. Cam's Bionic Knee. He wants the running back from Oregon State. Surprised you couldn't get him. I don't even know who it is, but I'm not going to lie. I don't know who that is, and you didn't name him. I don't know his name. So I don't even know if he's still there, but I'm surprised. If you wanted him, I'm surprised you didn't get him, because a lot of people looked to transfer out from Oregon State and Washington State because they were the two teams that got left out in the Pac-12. They had no conference to go to, but okay. Barclay Matheson says, UJ got some guy from Missouri who doesn't know how to button his chin strap, but I'll take Luther Burden III all day. UJ doesn't really have a playmaker at the moment. I agree, they really don't. Georgia's two primary playmakers last year were Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey, both of which were hurt for large portions of the season. And even going back to the year before that, their three biggest playmakers were really Ladd McConkey, Brock Bowers, and A.D. Mitchell. A.D. Mitchell transferred to Texas. Now Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey, of course, are gone off to the NFL. And again, Georgia's got a list. Georgia's wide receiver room is probably deeper and overall more talented than it's been in a long time, but there is no truly elite game-changing playmaker. There's not a 6'3", 6'4" wide receiver on the outside that can take the tops off of defenses and that the NFL is going to be looking to draft in the first round. Georgia just does not have that. Again, I'm not trying to argue that they need that in order to win a national title necessarily, but it would make it easier, especially in a year like last year where Georgia did struggle with injuries at those positions. Your two primary playmakers, Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey, both spent large portions of the season either injured to the point of not being able to play or hurt to where they played but were not able to give 100%. It would have been really, really nice to have A.D. Mitchell still on the team last year. It would have been really, really nice to have some five-star playmaking wide receiver that could have stepped in to fill in that gap. So I'm agreeing with a lot of these Georgia fans that are wanting to choose wide receivers to bring in. Zachary Griggy, who's a Florida State man, says he wants Shedeur Sanders to FSU. This is another instance here of a team that I think is getting ready to take a massive drop at the quarterback position. Like Ohio State, Florida State is losing a really, really good quarterback to the NFL, Jordan Travis. Like Ohio State, they went to the transfer portal to try to remedy that problem. They brought in DJ Uiagalelei, our buddy the ukulele, DJ Ugabadugi, from Oregon State by way of Clemson. He was at Clemson, transferred to Oregon State, spent a year there. Now he's transferring again to Florida State. I thought DJ Ugabaduki might have a breakout year last year at Oregon State for a couple of different reasons. I thought maybe it would be a better fit for him. I thought maybe the offense would be better for him, the competition, whatever you want to say. It didn't really happen. It looked like basically the same DJ Uiagalelei that we had seen at Clemson, and now he's transferring again to Florida State. And even if, and it's a big if, even if DJ Ugabadugi ends up improving vastly over what we saw at Oregon State, when he gets to Florida State, he is not going to give them what Jordan Travis gave him. He's just not. It's going to be a drop-off at the quarterback position. Again, that's not an insult to Florida State. Some of them are going to get mad. Some of the Ohio State fans will get mad. But here's the thing. When you have really, really high-level quarterback play, odds are it's going to drop off a little bit when that guy leaves. C.J. Stroud, Justin Fields, they leave. You're stuck with Kyle McCord and now Will Howard. I'm sorry. You're not going to get from those guys what you got from the previous two. You're not. And if you're Florida State, you've been running around for 2 years telling everybody Jordan Travis is the best quarterback on the planet. You can't now lose him, but then tell me that DJ Uiagalelei is going to be just as good or better. He's not. So it doesn't mean you can't win. It means you got to find a different way to win and make that up in other places, right? That's it. Not Rush Probst, which is good, says he's a Georgia fan and he would take Isaiah Bond. This surprises me. Bond is a potential guy. He really hasn't done anything. He was very highly recruited. He can, he's really fast. He can jump out of the building. He looks like he would be a really good wide receiver. Never really done anything in college football. It was kind of disappointing to me at Bama. The Bama fans feel the same way, but the realistic ones do. Seems to me like if you're a Georgia fan participating in this exercise and you decide that wide receiver is the position that we need to improve on, I don't know. I feel like maybe there would be a lot of wide receivers that you would name before Isaiah Bond, but Rush Prope says, give me Isaiah Bond. Chuck Billingham, also a Georgia fan, says Deontay Walker from Kentucky. He's a defensive tackle, 6'6.5", 348 pounds. We just haven't had that body type since Jordan Davis left. Georgia. Georgia's defensive line is similar to the quarterback situation at Ohio State and Florida State. For a several-year period, Georgia had elite, top of the top defensive line play with players like Trayvon Walker on the outside, Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter on the inside, just absolute beasts who are now all stars in the NFL, just like Ohio State had C.J. Stroud and Justin Fields, and Florida State had Jordan Travis. You lose that, and it doesn't mean that the guys you bring in aren't any good, but it's going to be almost impossible to replicate what you had before because the previous guys were so good. So I'm agreeing here with Chuck Billingham. I would love some help along the interior of the defensive line. An Aggie fan, Durag 12th Man, says he'll take Ant Hill. York plus Hill would just be insane, he says. Sports expert Max, I think he's an Ohio State fan. He says Will Campbell, offensive tackle at LSU. Ohio State could use an offensive tackle. I have even heard Ohio State fans mention that and some Ohio State fans will tell you that's their biggest concern heading into next year is a couple of holes along the offensive line that you got to get figured out. Will Campbell would be a good one. Daniel Mackey, who is basically Bigfoot, he's a Vanderbilt fan. He says, give me Arch Manning at Vandy. He'd probably be hurt before Game 3 after running for his life, but I'll take him anyway. Vandy needs a lot of help in a lot of different areas, don't they? K-Vol didn't understand the assignment. He says a fully healthy Brock Bowers. We're looking for players that are still in college football, though. Ohio State man says he'd love to have Caden Proctor. Caden Proctor was an offensive tackle, so here's another Ohio State fan. Look, this is an interesting exercise to do because I've cultivated such a trash talk environment on this channel that it becomes almost impossible for fans to admit that their team has any weakness at all. Everyone just pretends like they've got the best team all the time. We're going 100-0 and winning 19 natties and all that. That's what made this exercise so interesting, is because by answering the question, you're not admitting that your team has a weakness in that area necessarily, but you are admitting that there are players out there that you could bring in that may potentially be better than the players you currently have. And it's an interesting exercise to do. So let me know in the comments down below. There's a bunch of them. You can head over to my Twitter and read some of the other responses if you want. My Twitter's at Crazy Uncle Lou. And again, I'll try to come up with a question or two like this every week and maybe end up making a video about it if I get enough interesting responses. But let me know down below, who are you a fan of? Let us know that. A lot of people assume we all know who you're a fan of. We don't all know who you're a fan of. Let us know who's your team, and is there a player out there somewhere in the world of college football that you'd love to bring in to have an immediate impact on your team for this coming season? Let us know that in the comments down below. But I appreciate y'all watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please hit the thumbs up, subscribe if you're not already, and I'll talk to you next time. Have a good morning.